The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Emergency Department hummed their eternal song above my head as I charted the discharge paperwork for my last patient. 3 a.m. on a Thursday night, technically Friday morning, and the usual chaos had finally subsided to a manageable simmer. My feet throbbed in my practical white sneakers, the kind with extra arch support that still couldn't compensate for 12 hours of constant movement across tile floors that seemed designed to punish the living. I rubbed my eyes, careful not to smudge what remained of my mascara, though I wasn't sure why I bothered with makeup for night shifts anymore. No one saw me except the desperately ill, the tragically injured, and the occasionally intoxicated who stumbled through our doors seeking salvation, or at least a warm place to sleep. My reflection in the darkened computer screen showed a woman whose youth was rapidly becoming a memory. 28 years old, but with shadows under my eyes that aged me a decade. The debt collection letter in my locker was the real reason for those shadows. $47,000 remaining on Marcus's medical bills, even after I'd sold everything of value I owned, picked up every extra shift available, and stopped buying anything that wasn't absolutely essential for survival. My brother's leukemia treatment had saved his life, but it was slowly destroying mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. I worked in healthcare, surrounded by life-saving equipment and medicine, yet couldn't afford to save my own family without sacrificing my future. "Sarah, we've got an unusual situation." Dr. Patterson's voice cut through my exhausted reverie. He was leaning against the nurse's station, his silver hair disheveled from another long night. "There's a patient requesting a house call." I looked up from my paperwork, confused. "We don't do house calls. This is an emergency department." "I'm aware." He shifted uncomfortably, a gesture I'd never seen from the unflappable doctor who'd worked in war zones before settling into our urban emergency room. "But this patient is particular about his privacy. He's offering to pay cash, substantially, for a nurse willing to make an exception." The emphasis on substantially made my financial radar ping with interest despite my better judgment. "How substantial?" $5,000 for basic wound care and observation. Dr. Patterson pulled out a card. Expensive cardstock, no name, just a phone number embossed in black. He was treated here 2 years ago for a minor injury, paid his bill in full, cash, and apparently remembered our efficiency. $5,000. I could make a significant dent in Marcus's debt with that. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the card. "What kind of wound care?" "Gunshot wound to the shoulder," he says. "Non-life-threatening. Bullet passed through cleanly. He just needs cleaning, suturing if necessary, and monitoring for infection." Dr. Patterson's expression was carefully neutral. "He specifically requested someone with combat medical experience or extensive trauma care background. Your military nursing service came up in our records." Of course it did. 3 years in the Army Nurse Corps, deployed twice to Afghanistan, patching up soldiers under conditions that would horrify the civilian medical establishment. I'd learned to work with limited resources, to stay calm when bullets were flying, to make life or death decisions in seconds. Those skills had translated well to emergency medicine, but they'd also left me with scars that went deeper than anything visible on my skin. "This is illegal, isn't it?" I asked quietly. "Treating a gunshot wound without reporting it?" Dr. Patterson's silence was answer enough. I should have said no, should have handed back the card and pretended the offer never happened. But $47,000 loomed over me like a guillotine blade, and $5,000 would buy me breathing room, would let me sleep without nightmares about losing our tiny apartment, about Marcus's worried calls asking if I was eating enough. "I'll need details about the location and the patient's condition before I agree to anything," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And I'm not walking into anything dangerous." "Understood." Dr. Patterson looked relieved, which should have been my first warning. "Call the number. They're expecting to hear from you." 20 minutes later, I was driving my ancient Honda Civic through streets that grew progressively darker and more deserted as I left the familiar boundaries of my neighborhood. The voice on the phone had been professional, almost courteous, providing an address in an industrial district I'd never had reason to visit. The buildings here were hulking shadows, warehouses and manufacturing facilities that operated on different hours than the rest of the city, or perhaps didn't operate at all anymore. My GPS guided me to a nondescript building that looked like it might have once housed a textile factory. A man stepped out of the shadows as I pulled up, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. His face was hard, weathered, with eyes that scanned the street with practiced wariness. "Nurse Mitchell?" His voice matched the one from the phone. "That's me." I grabbed my medical bag from the passenger seat, the weight of it familiar and reassuring. "Before we go in, I need to establish some ground rules." His eyebrow raised slightly, the closest thing to surprise his face would show. "Ground rules? I'm here to provide medical care, nothing else. If the situation is beyond my capability, we go to a hospital, no arguments. And if I feel unsafe at any point, I leave immediately." I met his gaze without flinching, a skill I'd learned in the military. $5,000 doesn't buy my life or my nursing license. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. "Understood. Follow me." The interior of the building was a study in contrasts. The exterior industrial decay, giving way to an unexpectedly refined interior. Exposed brick walls, leather furniture, soft lighting that spoke of money and taste. Several other men were present, all watching me with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. I kept my expression professional, my grip on my medical bag firm. "Through here," my escort said, leading me to a door that opened into what appeared to be a private office. "He's waiting." The man sitting in the leather chair, shirt already removed to reveal a blood-soaked bandage wrapped around his left shoulder, was possibly the most striking person I'd ever seen. Dark hair, sharp features, and eyes the color of expensive whiskey that tracked my every movement as I entered. Despite the obvious pain he had to be in, his posture remained perfect, controlled, projecting authority even in vulnerability. "Nurse Mitchell." His voice was deep, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe, softened by years in America. "Thank you for coming." I set my medical bag on the desk and began pulling out supplies, falling into the familiar rhythm of assessment and preparation. "Let's skip the pleasantries and get to the medical issues. How long ago were you shot?" "Approximately 4 hours. Any dizziness, nausea, vision changes?" "No." "Excessive bleeding?" "It's mostly stopped." I applied pressure. I moved closer, carefully unwrapping the makeshift bandage. The wound was exactly as described, a clean through and through in the fleshy part of his shoulder, missing anything vital. He'd been lucky, or whoever shot him had been a terrible marksman. "This is going to hurt," I warned, beginning to clean the entrance wound with antiseptic solution. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just watched me work with those unsettling eyes, his breathing remaining steady even as I probed the wound to ensure no fabric or debris remained trapped inside. I'd treated soldiers with this same stoic determination, men trained to show no weakness, to push through pain that would cripple civilians. "You're former military," he said. It wasn't a question. "Army Nurse Corps, 3 years, 2 deployments." I continued working, my hands steady despite the strangeness of the situation. "You've been shot before. This isn't your first gunshot wound." "No, it's not." A slight curve of his lips, not quite a smile. "You're very observant." "It's my job." I began suturing the entrance wound, my stitches small and precise. Though usually my patients come to me at the hospital, with proper documentation and follow-up care. "I appreciate you making an exception." "I'm making an exception for $5,000, I corrected. "Let's not pretend this is about professional courtesy." He laughed, actually laughed, the sound surprising in the tense atmosphere. Direct. I like that. Most people are afraid to speak honestly to me. Should I be afraid? I asked, moving to examine the exit wound on his back. The positioning required me to stand close, to lean in, and I was acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth of his skin, the subtle scent of expensive cologne mixed with copper and gunpowder. Probably, he admitted. But you're not, are you? You're more annoyed than frightened. He was right. The fear I'd expected to feel hadn't materialized. Instead, I was focused on the medical task, irritated by the inconvenience and ethical compromise, but not scared. Maybe I was too tired for fear. Maybe I'd seen too much in Afghanistan to be frightened by one wounded man, however dangerous his reputation might be. The exit wound is clean, but larger, as expected, I said, changing the subject. I'll need to pack it and suture carefully to minimize scarring. You'll need oral antibiotics for at least a week, maybe 2 depending on healing, and someone should monitor you for the next 24 hours in case of complications. I'll have someone watching. I worked in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the quiet movements of the men outside and the occasional sharp intake of breath from my patient when I hit a particularly sensitive spot. When I finished the sutures and applied fresh bandages, I stepped back to survey my work. "You'll live," I announced. "Keep it clean and dry. Change the dressing twice daily. If you develop fever, increased pain, or any discharge that looks infected, you need proper medical care regardless of your privacy concerns. Infection from a gunshot wound can kill you just as surely as the bullet." "Understood." He reached for his shirt, and I noticed the scars. Old wounds, some from bullets, others from what looked like knife fights. This was a man who lived with violence as a constant companion. "You have beautiful hands, very steady." The observation was so unexpected, so out of place that I actually looked down at my hands. They were ordinary hands, a little rough from constant washing and sanitizer use. Short nails kept practical. A few small scars from the inevitable minor injuries that came with medical work. Nothing beautiful about them. "They're just hands," I said, packing my supplies back into my bag. "Functional, good for my job. They saved my life tonight, or at least spared me a very uncomfortable hospital visit with uncomfortable questions." He stood, moving carefully to avoid stressing his shoulder, and pulled an envelope from his desk drawer. "Your payment, as agreed, plus a bonus for your excellent work and discretion." The envelope was thick, heavy with cash. I opened it briefly. Not $5,000, but 7. The extra money made my stomach twist with a combination of relief and guilt. "This is too much. Consider it hazard pay for the ethical compromise I asked you to make." He extended his hand. "Sebastian Russo." I hesitated only briefly before shaking his hand, his grip firm and warm. "Sarah Mitchell, though you apparently already knew that. I make it my business to know about people before I invite them into my space." His hand lingered perhaps a moment longer than necessary before releasing mine. "Tell me, Nurse Mitchell, why does someone with your skills and dedication work night shifts in an emergency room? You could make far more in private practice or as a surgical nurse." "Personal reasons," I said shortly, not wanting to share Marcus's story with this stranger, however compelling he might be. "Thank you for the payment. Follow my instructions. Don't do anything stupid like getting shot again. And you should heal fine. Wait." His voice stopped me at the door. "If I needed medical assistance again, would you be willing to provide it? Same terms, same compensation?" I should have said no. Should have walked out and never looked back. Let this night become a strange memory and nothing more. But $7,000, and the debt that never seemed to shrink no matter how many shifts I worked. "I'm not making a habit of this," I said carefully. "But if you have a genuine medical emergency and calling 911 isn't an option, I suppose I could be convinced, for appropriate compensation. His smile was slow, satisfied, like a cat that had just secured its next meal. I'll keep that in mind, Nurse Mitchell. Drive safely. The streets around here aren't particularly friendly at this hour. The escort who'd brought me in materialized to walk me back to my car, his presence a silent protection against whatever dangers lurked in the industrial darkness. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just shifted in my life, though I couldn't quite articulate what or how. $7,000. I'd made $7,000 in a single night for work that had taken less than 2 hours. The relief was almost physical, a loosening of the constant anxiety that had become my baseline emotional state. I could pay down a chunk of Marcus's debt, buy myself a few months' breathing room, maybe even sleep without the debt collector's letters haunting my dreams. But as I merged onto the highway heading back toward my neighborhood, toward my small apartment and my regular life, I wondered what price I'd actually paid. Not just the ethical compromise of treating an unreported gunshot wound, but something else. Something in the way Sebastian Russo had looked at me, had spoken to me, had noticed my hands. Like I was interesting. Like I was more than just a means to an end. More than just the nurse who happened to be available and desperate enough to break the rules. The sun was rising as I finally climbed into my bed, too wired to sleep despite my exhaustion. I thought about Sebastian's scarred body, evidence of a violent life. Thought about his controlled demeanor even in pain, the authority he projected without effort. Thought about the substantial sum of money hidden in my bag, and the debt it would chip away at but not eliminate. Most of all, I thought about his parting words. If I needed medical assistance again, would you be willing to provide it? And despite knowing better, despite all my training and ethics and common sense, I had said yes. I had said yes to Sebastian Russo. 3 weeks passed without any contact from Sebastian Russo. I almost convinced myself that night had been an anomaly, a strange intersection of his need and my desperation that would never repeat. I'd paid off a significant chunk of Marcus's debt, endured fewer anxious nights staring at bills I couldn't afford, and gradually pushed the memory of those whiskey-colored eyes to the back of my mind where it belonged. Almost. The truth was, I thought about him more than I should. Wondered how his shoulder had healed, whether he'd followed my instructions, whether infection had set in, and he'd been too stubborn or too secretive to seek proper medical care. It was professional concern, I told myself. The kind any nurse would feel for a patient with a potentially serious injury. Nothing more. I was restocking supply closets during another night shift, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Professional instinct made me answer despite the late hour. Emergencies didn't respect normal business hours, and I'd given out my number to enough patients over the years that unexpected calls weren't unusual. Nurse Mitchell? The voice was immediately familiar, despite having heard it only once before. Sebastian Russo, sounding perfectly healthy and nowhere near an emergency. Mr. Russo. I kept my voice neutral, aware of my coworker Sophia pretending not to listen from the nurse's station 3 feet away. Is there a medical concern? Has your shoulder healed properly? Perfectly. Thanks to your excellent care. I followed every instruction. There was amusement in his tone, as if he could see through my professional distance to the curiosity beneath. I'm calling about a different matter. I have a proposition for you. A business proposition. I'm not interested in making house calls a regular arrangement, I said quickly. That night was a one-time exception. Not medical services, something entirely different. He paused, and I could hear city sounds in the background. Traffic, distant sirens, the ambient noise of urban evening. But not a conversation for the phone. Would you be willing to meet me tomorrow? Somewhere public, completely safe. Just to hear what I'm offering. Every instinct told me to refuse, to hang up, block the number, forget Sebastian Russo and his dangerous world existed. But curiosity was a persistent thing, And despite my better judgment, I heard myself asking, "What kind of proposition?" "The kind that comes with substantial financial compensation for minimal actual risk," he replied. "Meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Cafe Vittorio on Grant Street. You know it?" I did. It was a popular Italian cafe in a busy commercial district. Public, well-lit, filled with afternoon crowds of professionals on lunch breaks and students studying over espresso. About as safe a meeting place as one could imagine. "I know it." "Good. I'll buy you coffee. Explain what I need. And if you're not interested, you walk away with no further contact from me. You have my word." His word. What was the word of a man who lived outside the law worth? But the cafe was public. I could bring my phone with emergency contacts ready, and curiosity was eating at me. Plus, I had to admit, part of me wanted to see him again, to confirm he'd healed properly. That was all. Professional concern. Fine. 2 p.m. tomorrow. But I'm only listening, Mr. Russo. I'm not agreeing to anything. I wouldn't expect you to agree without hearing the details. That satisfied tone was back in his voice. "Thank you, Nurse Mitchell. I'll see you tomorrow." He disconnected before I could change my mind or demand more information. I stood in the supply closet, phone still pressed to my ear, wondering what I'd just agreed to. Was that a new boyfriend? Sophia appeared in the doorway, her expression innocently curious and completely unconvincing. "You don't usually take personal calls at work." "Former patient," I said shortly, returning to organizing bandages with unnecessary focus. "Just following up on treatment." Sophia's knowing tone suggested she didn't believe me for a second. "Must have been some treatment if he's calling you weeks later." I threw a box of gauze pads at her, which she caught with a laugh before disappearing back to the nurse's station. But her words lingered. What did Sebastian want? What kind of proposition came with substantial financial compensation for minimal actual risk? And why had he specifically sought me out when there must be dozens, hundreds of people better suited to whatever he needed? The next day found me at Cafe Vittorio 15 minutes early, a nervous habit from my military days when being on time meant arriving early enough to assess the situation. I chose a table near the window with clear sightlines to the door, and ordered a cappuccino I was too anxious to drink. The cafe was exactly as I remembered. Warm lighting, exposed brick walls covered with photographs of Italian villas, the rich scent of roasted coffee and baked goods filling the air. Sebastian arrived precisely at 2 p.m., and I was struck again by his presence. He wore casual clothes today, dark jeans, a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent, an expensive watch gleaming at his wrist. But it wasn't the clothes that commanded attention. It was the way he moved, the confidence in his bearing, the subtle weight of authority that seemed to bend the space around him. Several patrons glanced up as he passed, their gazes lingering with that mixture of curiosity and wariness that dangerous men provoked. Nurse Mitchell. He sat across from me without asking permission, signaling the waiter with a subtle gesture that brought immediate service. Espresso, black, no sugar. Thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries, I said, echoing my words from our first meeting. What do you want, Mr. Russo? A slight smile curved his lips. Still direct. I appreciate that quality. He took a sip of his espresso, apparently in no hurry despite my impatience. What I'm about to propose will sound unusual, possibly absurd, but I assure you I'm completely serious, and the compensation I'm offering reflects the unusual nature of the request. I'm listening. He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering despite the ambient noise of the cafe providing natural privacy. I need a wife, temporarily, for approximately 1 month, possibly extending to 6 weeks depending on circumstances. I blinked. Of all the propositions I'd imagined, this wasn't among them. You need a wife. Yes. Specifically, I need someone to convincingly play the role of my wife in front of my family. His expression remained serious. No hint of the joke I kept expecting. My grandmother is traditional, very traditional. She believes I need to settle down, marry, produce heirs to carry on the family legacy. She's threatened to hand control of certain family businesses to my cousin if I don't demonstrate I'm ready to act like a proper Italian man and not a perpetual bachelor. So marry someone for real, I suggested, still trying to process this bizarre request. Surely you know women who'd be interested. The women I know are either part of my world, which my grandmother would immediately recognize as unsuitable, or they're looking for something permanent, which I'm not offering. He studied me over the rim of his espresso cup. I need someone outside my usual circles, someone intelligent, capable, who can hold her own in difficult situations, someone who needs money enough to agree to an unusual arrangement, but isn't going to develop unrealistic expectations about our arrangement becoming real. And you think that someone is me? It wasn't a question. You're perfect for what I need. You're educated, well-spoken, composed under pressure. You proved that when you treated my gunshot wound without falling apart. His gaze was direct, assessing. You're also clearly in need of money given that you were willing to provide illegal medical services. And based on your reaction just now, you're not harboring romantic fantasies about me, which is essential. He wasn't wrong on any count, which was irritating. What exactly would this arrangement entail? You would move into my apartment for the duration. We'd attend family dinners and events together. You'd meet my grandmother and convince her that we're genuinely married, genuinely committed. He pulled out his phone, tapping through to what appeared to be a detailed document. I've had my lawyer draw up a contract outlining every aspect. You'd be compensated $100,000 for 1 month's participation, with bonuses for extended time if necessary. $100,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I could pay off all of Marcus's remaining medical debt with that much money. Could establish a real emergency fund. Could breathe without the constant crushing anxiety of financial disaster lurking around every corner. This is insane, I managed. You're offering me $100,000 to pretend to be your wife for a month? Yes, with clear boundaries outlined in the contract. Separate bedrooms, no physical intimacy required, complete discretion on both sides. He slid his phone across the table so I could read the document. Everything in writing, legally binding. My lawyer will be available to answer any questions you have before you decide. I scrolled through the contract, my mind reeling. It was extraordinarily detailed. Specific scenarios we'd need to navigate, protocols for family interactions, explicit statements about the temporary nature of the arrangement. Near the end, a clause caught my attention. The client agrees to make no romantic or sexual advances toward the contractor, and both parties acknowledge this is a business arrangement with no expectation of actual relationship development. Why me specifically? I asked, looking up from the phone. You could hire an actress, someone trained to play roles convincingly. Because actresses act, they play parts. His expression was thoughtful, serious. I need someone real, someone whose reactions are genuine even if the relationship isn't. My grandmother is sharp, perceptive. She'd see through a performance immediately. But you, he gestured vaguely. You're not performing. You're just yourself, even in unusual circumstances. That authenticity is what I need. It made a strange kind of sense, which somehow made the whole proposition even more surreal. I need time to think about this, and I want my own lawyer to review the contract. Of course. Take a week if you need it. He pulled a business card from his wallet, this one with actual contact information, not just a mysterious phone number. Call me when you've decided, but Sarah. The use of my first name drew my attention back to his face. I wouldn't offer this to someone I didn't trust. What I saw that night you treated me, your competence, your courage, your discretion, those are rare qualities. Whatever you decide, I respect your professionalism." He left cash on the table to cover both our drinks and stood, preparing to leave. I found myself speaking before I'd consciously decided to. "Wait. I have conditions. If I were to even consider this." He sat back down, giving me his full attention. "I'm listening." "Half the money goes to charity, to the community clinic where I volunteer on my days off. They need funding desperately, and I won't profit from deception without making something good come from it." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "Agreed. Any other conditions?" "I maintain my regular work schedule at the hospital. This arrangement doesn't interfere with my actual job." I was warming to the negotiation now, my mind racing through implications. "And I'm not doing anything illegal beyond the marriage fraud itself. No involvement in whatever business you actually run." "Also agreed. The arrangement is separate from my business dealings." He extended his hand across the table. "Do we have a potential deal, pending your lawyer's review?" I stared at his hand, at the decision point I'd somehow reached without fully processing how I'd gotten here. $100,000. Marcus's debt eliminated. The clinic funded. A month of my life in exchange for financial security I'd never imagined possible. "Pending my lawyer's review," I echoed, shaking his hand. His grip was warm, firm, his calluses speaking to activities beyond signing paperwork in expensive offices. "I'll call you within a week." As I drove home, my mind spun with the implications of what I was considering. Pretending to be Sebastian Russo's wife, living in his apartment, meeting his family, maintaining the elaborate fiction for an entire month or more. It was crazy, potentially dangerous, definitely unethical. But $100,000 would change my life. And despite everything, I was seriously considering saying yes. My lawyer, Rebecca Chen, stared at the contract for a long moment before looking up at me with an expression that suggested I'd lost my mind. We sat in her modest office in Chinatown, surrounded by filing cabinets and law books, the window behind her framing a slice of city skyline that seemed impossibly distant from the conversation we were having. "Sarah, I need you to understand what you're agreeing to here." She tapped the document with her pen, each strike punctuating her concern. "This is fraud. Marriage fraud specifically. If discovered, you could face federal charges, fines up to $250,000, and up to 5 years in prison." "I understand the risks," I said, though hearing them articulated so plainly made my stomach twist with anxiety. "But the contract itself is legitimate." "Ironically, yes. The contract outlining your fraudulent arrangement is legally sound." She flipped through the pages again, shaking her head. "Whoever wrote this knew exactly what they were doing. Every possible contingency is addressed. Your compensation is structured as payment for personal assistant services to avoid tax complications. There are confidentiality clauses, termination conditions, even provisions for what happens if either party develops actual romantic feelings." That last detail made me pause. "What does it say about that?" "That the arrangement terminates immediately if either party wishes to pursue a genuine relationship, with you receiving prorated compensation for time served." Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "Sarah, I've known you for 3 years. You helped Marcus through his treatment. You work yourself to exhaustion to pay down his debt. You volunteer at the clinic on your days off. You're one of the most principled people I know. This doesn't seem like you." "Neither does drowning in medical debt for the rest of my life," I countered. "Neither does watching Marcus feel guilty every day because his illness destroyed my financial stability. This is 1 month, Rebecca. 1 month of pretending, and I'm free. We're both free." She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with the same careful assessment she probably used on hostile witnesses. "If you do this, follow every clause of this contract to the letter. Document everything. Keep copies of all communications." "And Sarah?" Her voice dropped. Be very careful. A man who lives the kind of life that requires fake marriages to satisfy his grandmother is a man who operates in dangerous circles. I know what he is, I said quietly, remembering the scars on Sebastian's body, the controlled violence in the way his associates moved. I'm going into this with my eyes open. That evening, I called the number on Sebastian's business card. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm despite the professional tone. Nurse Mitchell, have you made a decision? My lawyer reviewed the contract. I have a few additional stipulations. I'm listening. I want it in writing that I'm never asked to participate in anything illegal beyond the marriage deception itself. No money laundering, no meetings with people involved in criminal activities, nothing that could implicate me in your actual business operations. I paced my small apartment as I spoke, nervous energy requiring movement. And I want a clause that allows me to terminate immediately if I feel unsafe, with full compensation for time served up to that point. Reasonable requests. I'll have my lawyer add those provisions. There was a pause, the sound of traffic in the background suggesting he was outside somewhere. Anything else? The $50,000 for the clinic. I want to choose which programs it funds. I know where the money is needed most. Of course, it's your donation. His voice held that note of approval I'd heard before, as if my conditions pleased rather than annoyed him. Should I take this to mean you're agreeing to the arrangement? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle over my shoulders like a physical thing. Yes, I'm agreeing. Excellent. Can you meet me tomorrow evening? I'd like to introduce you to my grandmother before we begin the official charade. She'll want to meet the woman who finally captured my heart. The dry humor in his voice suggested he found his grandmother's romanticism both endearing and exasperating. Wear something nice but not too formal. She's traditional but not stuffy. Where and when? I'll pick you up at your apartment at 6. And Sarah. The use of my first name still felt intimate, presumptuous. Thank you. I know this is unconventional, but I appreciate your willingness to help. After we disconnected, I stood in my tiny living room, looking around at the space that had been my sanctuary for the past 2 years. The secondhand furniture I'd carefully selected, the plants I somehow kept alive despite my chaotic schedule, the photographs of Marcus and me from before his diagnosis, when life had seemed so much simpler. In a few days, I'd be living in Sebastian's apartment, playing the role of his wife, navigating a world I'd only glimpsed through that single night of emergency medical care. What had I agreed to? The next evening, I changed outfits 4 times before settling on a navy dress that was elegant without being overly formal, paired with the one good pair of heels I owned. My hair had been tamed into soft waves, my makeup carefully applied to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. I looked like someone who might plausibly be Sebastian Russo's wife, which was the point, but the reflection in my mirror seemed like a stranger. Sebastian arrived exactly at 6, driving a black Mercedes that looked freshly detailed. He'd dressed in dark slacks and a charcoal button-down shirt with the top buttons undone, revealing the edge of the scar I'd sutured weeks ago. The sight of my handiwork sent an odd flutter through my chest. Professional pride mixed with something else I didn't want to examine too closely. "You look beautiful," he said as I slid into the passenger seat, the leather cool and impossibly soft beneath me. Though you should get used to me saying that. My grandmother will expect me to be attentive and complimentary. Noted, and you look. I paused, searching for appropriate words. Like someone who wouldn't need to pay a woman to pretend to marry him. His laugh was genuine, warm. I'm not sure if that was a compliment or an observation, but I'll take it. He pulled away from my building, navigating city traffic with practiced ease. Tell me about yourself, Sarah. If I'm going to convince my grandmother we're madly in love, I should probably know more than your medical credentials and your impressive ability to remain calm under pressure. What do you want to know? Everything. Where you grew up. What made you become a nurse. Why you volunteer at a community clinic when you're already working 60-hour weeks. His glance was curious, genuinely interested rather than just gathering information for his deception. Start wherever feels comfortable. So I told him. About growing up in a small town in Ohio with Marcus, raised by our grandmother after our parents died in a car accident when I was 12. About joining the military to pay for nursing school. About the deployments that had changed me in ways I was still processing. About Marcus's leukemia diagnosis 3 years ago. The desperate months of treatment. The miraculous remission that had saved his life, but destroyed our financial stability. He wanted to drop out of college to help pay the bills, I said, staring out the window at the city passing by. Can you imagine? He'd just survived cancer, just gotten his life back, and he wanted to sacrifice his education because he felt guilty about the debt. I told him if he didn't finish his degree, I'd never forgive him. Where does he go to school? State University, engineering major. He's brilliant, Sebastian. Absolutely brilliant. He'll do something important with his life once he graduates. Pride warmed my voice, the same pride I always felt when talking about Marcus. That's why the debt was worth it. Why I'd do it all again without hesitation. You're remarkable. The words were quiet, matter of fact, as if he were stating an obvious truth rather than offering a compliment. Most people talk about what they'd do for family. You actually do it. What about you? I turned the question back on him, uncomfortable with his admiration. Tell me about your family. Your grandmother, your cousin, whoever else I'm going to need to convince. His expression shifted, pleasure mixing with something more complex, affection tinged with exasperation. Nonna Rosa is 83, sharp as a knife, and has very specific ideas about how her grandsons should live their lives. She came to America from Sicily in 1965, worked her fingers to the bone to build a better life for her children. Everything I am, everything our family has, started with her determination and sacrifice. And she wants you married. She wants me settled, married, preferably with children on the way, demonstrating that I'm capable of building something beyond the family business. He navigated onto a quieter street lined with brownstones, elegant homes that spoke of old money and established family roots. My cousin Antonio is married with 2 children. He's the responsible one, the family man. I'm the one who worries her, who she thinks needs the stabilizing influence of a good woman. Why haven't you actually gotten married? The question was bold, probably too personal, but if I was going to play his wife, I needed to understand his motivations. You're successful, attractive, clearly capable of commitment given how seriously you're taking this arrangement. What's the real reason you're still single? He was quiet for a long moment, pulling up in front of a beautiful brownstone with window boxes full of flowers and a meticulously maintained front garden. Because everyone I've dated has either been terrified of what I am or drawn to it for the wrong reasons. The danger is exciting until it's real. The power is attractive until they understand the cost. He turned to face me, his expression unreadable in the fading light. I haven't met anyone who could accept both sides. The legitimate businessman and the man who sometimes makes difficult choices in gray areas. Until perhaps you. I'm not accepting anything, I said quickly. I'm playing a role for a month. There's a difference. Of course. But his slight smile suggested he didn't entirely believe my distinction. Come on. Nonna is expecting us, and she hates when people are late. The brownstone's interior was exactly what I'd expected. Traditional Italian elegance, family photographs covering nearly every available surface, the scent of something delicious cooking wafting from the kitchen. An elderly woman appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on an apron, her face lighting up with joy at the sight of Sebastian. Sebastiano, finally you bring her to meet me. She switched to rapid Italian, and Sebastian responded in kind, his whole demeanor softening in his grandmother's presence. Then she turned to me, her dark eyes, so like Sebastian's, assessing me with obvious curiosity. "And you are the woman who has captured my stubborn grandson's heart. Come, let me look at you." I stepped forward, suddenly nervous in a way I hadn't been even facing down wounded soldiers in Afghanistan. Nonna Rosa took my hands in hers, small, weathered hands that spoke of decades of hard work, and studied my face with an intensity that felt like she was reading my soul. "She has kind eyes," Nonna announced in English, apparently satisfied with whatever she'd seen. "And strong hands. A nurse, Sebastiano tells me. You help people." "I try to," I replied, finding my voice. "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Russo. Call me Nonna. Everyone does." She patted my cheek with surprising gentleness. "Come, dinner is almost ready. You will tell me how you met my grandson, yes? And how you made him finally want to settle down when every other woman failed." Sebastian caught my eye as his grandmother bustled back toward the kitchen, his expression holding amusement, and something that might have been apology. We'd prepared a story, of course. We'd met when I treated him at the hospital for a minor injury, had coffee afterward, discovered an unexpected connection. All lies, but close enough to the truth to be believable. The evening passed in a blur of delicious food, probing questions from Nonna Rosa, and the increasingly comfortable fiction Sebastian and I wove together. We talked about our courtship, how he'd pursued me despite my initial reluctance, how he'd won me over with his persistence and unexpected tenderness. The lies came easier than I'd expected, perhaps because there were fragments of truth woven through them. The way he had been unexpectedly gentle despite his dangerous reputation, the respect he'd shown for my professional boundaries, the strange connection that had sparked between us that night. "You make him smile," Nonna observed, watching Sebastian with obvious affection. "Really smile, not the polite expression he uses for business. I haven't seen that since." She trailed off, her expression clouding briefly before brightening again. "You are good for him, Sarah. I see this clearly." Guilt twisted in my chest. This kind, perceptive woman was being deceived, believing her grandson had finally found love when it was all an elaborate fiction for money. But then I thought of the clinic, of the children and elderly patients who would receive care because of this deception, of Marcus graduating debt-free, able to start his career without the crushing weight of medical bills. Sometimes good things grew from morally gray soil. As we prepared to leave, Nonna Rosa pulled me aside, her expression suddenly serious. "My Sebastiano, he shows the world a hard face. Strong, unbreakable. But inside..." She pressed her hand over her heart. "Inside, he feels deeply. He has been hurt before, though he would never admit it. You will be careful with him. Yes?" The irony of being asked to protect Sebastian's heart while deceiving his grandmother was almost too much. But I nodded, finding truth in the promise even if the context was false. "I'll be careful with him, Nonna. You have my word." She hugged me then, a fierce embrace that smelled of cooking herbs and lavender, and I had to blink back unexpected tears. This was going to be harder than I'd anticipated, not the deception itself, but the emotional weight of deceiving people who showed me genuine warmth and acceptance. In the car driving back, Sebastian was quiet for several blocks before speaking. "You were perfect tonight, better than I hoped." "Your grandmother is wonderful," I said softly. "I hate lying to her." "I know, but this is what she wants, to see me settled before she..." He didn't finish the sentence, but I heard the unspoken fear. Nonna Rosa was 83. Time was limited. She's happy tonight, believing I've found someone who makes me better. Isn't that worth something? I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. because I wasn't sure anymore where the line between justifiable deception and cruel manipulation fell. All I knew was that I'd committed to this arrangement, and I would see it through. For the money, yes, but also, increasingly, for reasons I was afraid to examine too closely. For the way Sebastian's whole demeanor had softened with his grandmother, for the glimpses of the man beneath the dangerous reputation, for the strange comfort I felt in his presence despite knowing better than to trust it. "Tomorrow, you'll move into my apartment," Sebastian said as we approached my building. "I'll send movers to help with your things. Pack whatever you need for a month or so. We have family dinner on Sunday, and it's important that we seem comfortable living together by then." "Understood." I reached for the door handle, then paused. "Sebastian, thank you for tonight. For being patient with me. For making this easier than it could have been." His hand caught mine briefly, his thumb brushing across my knuckles in a gesture that sent unexpected warmth through me. "We're partners in this, Sarah. Equals. I want you to be comfortable, to feel safe. That matters to me." I should have pulled my hand away, should have reminded him that this was business, nothing more. But the warmth of his touch, the sincerity in his voice, made me pause. Made me wonder if maybe this arrangement was more complicated than a simple exchange of deception for money. "Good night, Sebastian," I said finally, extracting my hand and stepping out into the cool evening air. As I watched his Mercedes disappear down the street, I pressed my palm against my chest, feeling my heart beat faster than it should. This was supposed to be simple, straightforward, a business arrangement with clear boundaries and no emotional complications. But standing there in the darkness, my hand still warm from his touch, I had the sinking feeling that nothing about Sebastian Russo was ever going to be simple. And I had just agreed to share his life, his space, his world for the next month. God help me. Sebastian's apartment occupied the entire top floor of a converted warehouse in the revitalized district near the waterfront. The building's exterior maintained its industrial character, exposed brick, steel-framed windows, but the interior was pure sophistication. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city and harbor, the view so spectacular I actually stopped in the doorway when I first entered, my boxes of belongings forgotten in my arms. "It's beautiful," I breathed, watching sunlight dance across the water in the distance. "I'm glad you approve." Sebastian took the boxes from me, setting them on the polished concrete floor. "Your room is this way. I thought you'd prefer the guest suite rather than sharing the master. It has its own bathroom and plenty of closet space." The guest suite was larger than my entire apartment had been. A king-sized bed dominated the space, dressed in expensive linens in shades of cream and gray. The attached bathroom featured a rainfall shower and a soaking tub that looked like something from a luxury spa. Abstract art decorated the walls, original pieces, I suspected, not prints. "This is too much," I said, though I was already imagining sinking into that tub after a long shift. "I don't need all this space." "You're doing me a significant favor, Sarah. The least I can offer is comfort while you're here." He gestured toward the walk-in closet. "I had some things delivered for you. Clothing appropriate for family events, dinners, casual occasions. If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, we can exchange it." I opened the closet to find it full of designer clothing, still bearing tags with prices that made my stomach flip. Dresses, blouses, slacks, even casual jeans that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Sebastian, this is insane. I can't accept all this." "You can, and you will." His tone was firm but not unkind. "My family will expect my wife to dress a certain way. These are tools for the role you're playing, nothing more. Consider them part of your compensation." "My compensation is $100,000, I reminded him. "That was the agreement. The agreement also states I'll provide everything necessary for you to convincingly play the role. He moved toward the door, giving me space to process. Get settled. I have some work calls to make, but I'll be in my office if you need anything. We'll have dinner together around 7. It's important we get comfortable with each other's company before Sunday's family dinner. After he left, I slowly unpacked my meager belongings, feeling increasingly out of place among all this luxury. My sensible scrubs and practical shoes looked ridiculous, hanging next to silk blouses and Italian leather heels. My drugstore cosmetics seemed laughable on the marble bathroom counter. Even my few books, dog-eared paperbacks and medical textbooks, looked shabby on the built-in shelving. I was arranging my toiletries when my phone rang. Marcus, his timing impeccable as always. Hey, how's the new place? His voice was cheerful, unaware of the complicated web I was weaving. It's nice. Really nice. I'd told him I'd taken a live-in position as a private nurse for a wealthy client who needed overnight monitoring. Not entirely a lie, just missing some crucial details. How's school? Good. I aced my thermodynamics exam, and Professor Chen said my design project shows real promise. His excitement was infectious, and I found myself smiling despite my anxiety. Sarah, I can't thank you enough for making it possible for me to focus on school instead of worrying about money. You're the best sister in the world. Guilt twisted in my chest. You'd do the same for me. In a heartbeat. Hey, are you sure you're okay? You sound stressed. Just adjusting to the new routine, I lied smoothly. Different schedule, different environment. I'll be fine once I settle in. We talked for a few more minutes before he had to rush to class. After we hung up, I sat on the impossibly soft bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror across the room. A month ago, I'd been drowning in debt, working myself to exhaustion, volunteering at a clinic that couldn't afford to pay me. Now I was living in luxury, wearing designer clothes, pretending to be the wife of a man who existed in a world I barely understood. What did that make me? Dinner that evening was surprisingly comfortable. Sebastian had ordered takeout from an Italian restaurant. Not delivery, but actual plated meals in proper dishes, the kind of service that came with serious money. We ate at the dining table overlooking the city, the conversation flowing more easily than I'd expected. Tell me about your volunteer work at the clinic, he said, refilling my wine glass. What made you start doing that? I saw how Marcus struggled to get care before his diagnosis, how many obstacles there were for people without insurance or money. I pushed pasta around my plate, remembering those desperate months. The clinic serves the community I grew up in. Immigrants, working poor, people who fall through the cracks of the healthcare system. I started volunteering during my residency and never stopped. And you want to use your half of the payment to expand their services. To fund a pediatric program specifically. There are so many children who need vaccinations, checkups, treatment for chronic conditions like asthma that go unmanaged because their families can't afford regular care. I met his gaze, needing him to understand this mattered. That money will literally save lives, Sebastian. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, consistently. That's worth something. It's worth everything, he said quietly. Something in his expression had shifted, softened. My grandmother grew up in poverty in Sicily. She talks about watching her younger brother die from an infection that could have been cured with proper medical care. The helplessness of knowing that money, just money, was the only thing standing between her brother and survival. I'm sorry. That must have been devastating for her. It shaped everything about how she views the world. Why she pushed my grandfather to build something lasting, something that would ensure her children and grandchildren never knew that kind of helplessness. He took a sip of wine, his gaze distant. She'd like you even more if she knew about the clinic work. She'd recognize that impulse to protect people who can't protect themselves. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Movies we'd seen, books we'd read, the strange satisfaction of finding another person who'd also read the entire Discworld series. By the time we finished dinner, I'd almost forgotten this was all an elaborate pretense. Almost. "We should establish some ground rules," Sebastian said as we cleared the dishes. Boundaries we're both comfortable with. I nodded, grateful he was addressing this directly. "Agreed. What did you have in mind?" "Physical affection will be necessary in public. Holding hands, casual touches, maybe a kiss on the cheek or forehead, but nothing beyond what you're comfortable with, and never when we're alone, unless you initiate it." His expression was serious, professional. "Your bedroom door has a lock. Use it if you feel safer that way. I'll never enter your space without explicit permission." "Thank you. That matters." I hesitated, then added, "What about your actual life? Your business, whatever that entails? How much will I be exposed to?" "As little as possible. There will be some events where business associates are present, but you'll be introduced as my wife. Nothing more. You're not expected to understand or participate in business discussions." He leaned against the counter, his posture relaxed, but his eyes intent. "But Sarah, I need you to understand something. If you ever feel unsafe, if anything happens that threatens you, you tell me immediately. Your safety is non-negotiable. Even though this is just a business arrangement, especially because it's a business arrangement, you're under my protection now, whether the relationship is real or not. That matters to me." The intensity in his voice sent an unexpected flutter through my chest. I'd spent my adult life being independent, relying on myself, asking nothing from anyone. Having someone declare my safety was their responsibility felt foreign and oddly comforting in equal measure. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. I maintained my hospital shifts, returning to Sebastian's apartment afterward to find him usually working in his home office, handling whatever business required his attention. We'd have dinner together, practicing the casual intimacy that a real couple would share, the comfortable silences, the small observations about our days, the gradual building of inside jokes and shared references. It was disturbingly easy to slip into the pretense. Sunday arrived with perfect autumn weather, and I dressed in one of the outfits Sebastian had provided, a burgundy dress that was elegant without being overly formal, paired with heels that were surprisingly comfortable despite their designer label. I'd learned to navigate the luxury clothing over the past few days, though I still couldn't shake the feeling I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. "You look perfect," Sebastian said when I emerged from my room. He'd dressed in dark slacks and a charcoal sweater, the top buttons of his shirt undone in a way that was casually elegant. "Ready to face the family gauntlet?" "As ready as I'll ever be. Remind me who's going to be there?" "Nonna Rosa, obviously. My cousin Antonio and his wife Maria, their kids. My Aunt Francesca, Nonna's daughter, and probably a few others. Sunday dinners are family affairs. Very traditional." He hesitated, then added, "Antonio can be difficult. He resents that Nonna favors me for leadership positions in the family business. Your presence will aggravate that resentment." "Noted. Should I be worried?" "No. Antonio is ambitious and occasionally petty, but he's not dangerous. Just don't let him bait you into arguments about family politics." Sebastian's hand found the small of my back as we headed for the door, the touch casual but warm. "Stay close to me, and if you're uncomfortable with anything, squeeze my hand twice. I'll extract us." The family home where Sunday dinners were held was a beautiful estate in the suburbs, the kind of place that spoke of generations of accumulated wealth. Cars already filled the circular driveway, expensive vehicles that probably represented more money than I'd make in a decade. I felt my anxiety spike as Sebastian parked, my breath coming shorter. "Hey." His hand covered mine where it gripped my purse. "You're a trauma nurse who worked in combat zones. You can handle my family for a few hours." I laughed despite my nerves. Battlefield injuries feel more straightforward than navigating family dynamics. Fair point. But you're not navigating alone. We're partners, remember? The warmth in his voice steadied me. I nodded, squaring my shoulders. Okay, let's do this. The interior of the house was organized chaos. Children's laughter echoed from somewhere upstairs, multiple conversations in Italian and English overlapping in the living room, and the incredible scent of Nonna Rosa's cooking wafting from the kitchen. An elegant woman in her 50s appeared immediately, her eyes widening at the sight of Sebastian. "Sebastiano! And you must be Sarah!" She embraced me before I could respond, her perfume expensive, and her smile genuine. "I'm Francesca, Sebastian's aunt. Mama has told us all about you. Come, come. Everyone is dying to meet the woman who finally tamed our wild boy." I shot Sebastian a look. Wild boy. And he shrugged with amusement as his aunt dragged me toward the living room. The next few minutes were a blur of introductions. Antonio proved to be a polished man in his late 30s with his father's coloring, but without Sebastian's presence, his smile not quite reaching his eyes when he shook my hand. His wife Maria was warmer, immediately engaging me in conversation about my work as a nurse. "It must be so rewarding," she said, balancing a toddler on her hip while their older son played nearby. "And demanding. How do you manage the long hours?" "Coffee and stubbornness, mostly," I replied, and she laughed, the sound genuine. "I like her, Sebastiano," Maria announced. "She's real. Not like some of the others you've brought around." The comment hung in the air for a beat before Sebastian smoothly deflected. "Sarah is definitely real. Sometimes too real. She has no qualms about telling me when I'm being unreasonable." "Good. Someone needs to keep you humble." Nonna Rosa appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron and beaming at us. "Sarah, you come help me finish the antipasti, yes? I want to hear more about how you're managing my stubborn grandson." In the kitchen, surrounded by the organized chaos of Italian cooking, Nonna Rosa handed me vegetables to chop while she worked on assembling platters. The work was soothing, familiar. Cooking had always been my meditation, one of the few activities that quieted my anxious mind. "You are comfortable in a kitchen," Nonna observed. "This is good. A family needs someone who can feed them with love, not just money." "My grandmother taught me to cook," I said, falling into the easy rhythm of preparation. "She said food was how we showed care when words weren't enough." "A wise woman. She raised you well." Nonna's gaze was assessing but kind. "You love him, my Sebastiano?" The direct question caught me off guard. I'd prepared for curious questions, for gentle probing, but not for this straightforward inquiry. "Yes," I heard myself say, and was startled to realize I couldn't quite tell if it was entirely a lie. "He's unexpected. Not what I thought he'd be. No one is what they seem on the surface. But you see deeper, I think. You see the man he could be, the man he wants to be, not just the man he shows the world." She patted my hand, her touch gentle. "This is why you are good for each other. You see truth." Guilt twisted in my chest, sharp and uncomfortable. This kind woman was reading depth and meaning into a relationship that was fundamentally transactional, and I was letting her believe the lie. But before I could spiral into self-recrimination, Sebastian appeared in the doorway. "Nonna, are you interrogating my wife?" His tone was light, teasing, but his eyes held concern as they met mine. "I am getting to know her. This is not interrogation. This is family." Nonna shooed him with her apron. "Go, set the table. Make yourself useful instead of hovering." The dinner itself was extraordinary. Multiple courses, each more delicious than the last, accompanied by wine and conversation that flowed in a mixture of English and Italian. I sat beside Sebastian, his hand occasionally finding mine under the table, in gestures that appeared affectionate, but also felt reassuring, grounding. as if he was reminding me I wasn't alone in this performance. Antonio dominated much of the conversation, discussing business developments with Sebastian in terms vague enough that I couldn't quite determine what industry they were actually in. When Sebastian deflected certain questions, Antonio's expression would tighten with barely concealed frustration. "So, Sarah," Antonio said eventually, his attention shifting to me with unnerving focus. "Sebastian tells us you're a nurse. Emergency medicine, is that right?" "Yes. I work at St. Mary's Hospital downtown." "Dangerous work sometimes, I'd imagine. You must see all sorts of interesting cases." The pause before interesting felt weighted, deliberate. Gunshot wounds, stabbings, that sort of thing. Sebastian's hand tightened on mine, a warning. "Sarah sees everything an urban emergency department encounters. She's excellent at her job, which is why she's respected by her colleagues." "I'm sure she is." Antonio's smile didn't waver. "I just wonder if she's prepared for the unique challenges of being part of our family. We're not like other families, as I'm sure you've noticed, Sarah. We have specific expectations, specific traditions. Not everyone adapts well." The implication was clear. I was an outsider who didn't belong, who wouldn't fit into their world. Part of me wanted to defend myself, to push back against his subtle hostility. But I remembered Sebastian's warning about not engaging with Antonio's provocations. "I'm adaptable," I said calmly. "And I care about Sebastian. That's what matters to me, making him happy, supporting him. The rest I'll learn as I go." "Well said," Nonna Rosa interjected, her sharp gaze fixed on Antonio with obvious disapproval. "Family is not about bloodlines or traditions. It is about loyalty, about love, about choosing each other every day. Sarah understands this, perhaps better than some who were born into this family." The rebuke was gentle, but unmistakable. Antonio's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more, turning his attention back to his meal. Under the table, Sebastian's thumb stroked across my knuckles in silent thanks. After dinner, the men retreated to the study for what was apparently a regular business discussion, leaving me with the women and children. Maria proved to be delightful company, and we found easy conversation about everything from the challenges of healthcare to the chaos of managing young children. Even Francesca warmed to me, sharing embarrassing stories about young Sebastian that made me laugh genuinely. "He was such a serious child," Francesca recalled, her expression fond. "Always watching, always thinking. We worried about him after. Well, he grew up too fast, took on too much responsibility too young." "After what?" I asked, curiosity overriding discretion. The women exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. "His parents," Maria said quietly. "They died when he was 19. Car accident. Very sudden. Sebastian had to step up immediately, take over responsibilities he wasn't quite ready for." My chest tightened with unexpected sympathy. I'd lost my own parents young, understood the weight of forced premature adulthood, the way tragedy could steal your youth and replace it with responsibilities that aged you before your time. I didn't know. He hasn't talked much about his parents. He doesn't, not even with family. Nonna Rosa had returned from the kitchen, her expression sad. "He keeps that pain locked away, thinks showing grief is weakness. But you, Sarah, maybe you can help him understand it's okay to feel, to remember, to mourn what was lost." I nodded, though I had no idea how to help someone grieve when our entire relationship was a carefully constructed fiction with an expiration date. But the revelation added dimensions to Sebastian I hadn't expected. The orphaned young man thrust into leadership, carrying responsibilities that would have crushed most people, building an empire on foundations of loss and determination. When the men finally emerged from the study, Sebastian's expression was carefully controlled, but I'd learned to read the subtle signs of tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. Something in that meeting had bothered him. As we said our goodbyes and headed to the car, his hand found mine with what felt like genuine need rather than performance. "You okay?" I asked, once we were on the road heading back to the city. Antonio is pushing for more control of certain operations, making arguments to Nona about my priorities being divided now that I'm married. His jaw was tight, his grip on the steering wheel perhaps harder than necessary. He suggested that having a wife means I'm not as focused, not as committed to family interests. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause problems for you." "You're not causing anything. Antonio is just being Antonio." Sebastian glanced at me, his expression softening. "You were perfect today, by the way. The way you handled Nona's questions, how you deflected Antonio's provocations, the easy way you fit in with the women, even better than I hoped. Your family is lovely, complicated, but lovely." I paused, then added carefully, "Maria told me about your parents. I'm sorry, Sebastian. Losing them so young must have been devastating." His hands tightened on the wheel, his expression shuddering. "It was a long time ago. Grief doesn't follow timelines. Trust me, I know." I thought of my own parents. The hole their loss had left that never quite filled, just became familiar. My parents died when I was 12. Sometimes I still reach for the phone to call them when something good happens, then remember they're not there to answer. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with suppressed emotion. "I was supposed to be in that car. I'd stayed late at the office to finish some paperwork. Told them to go ahead to dinner without me. If I'd left on time, if I'd been with them. You'd probably be dead too," I finished softly. Survivor's guilt is a bitch, I know. But Sebastian, it wasn't your fault. Accidents are called accidents for a reason. They're random, senseless, not anyone's fault. Logically, I know that. But logic doesn't erase the guilt, or the loneliness of suddenly being responsible for everything when you're barely an adult yourself. I reached over, covering his hand with mine on the gear shift. "For what it's worth, I think you've done an extraordinary job. Your grandmother adores you. Your aunt respects you. Even Antonio's jealousy comes from recognizing your competence. They're lucky to have you." His hand turned under mine, fingers intertwining with a gentleness that made my breath catch. "Thank you, Sarah. For understanding. For not pushing. For just being here." The moment felt dangerously intimate, too real for our pretend relationship. I should have pulled away, should have reinforced the boundaries between performance and reality. But his hand was warm in mine, and the vulnerability in his voice touched something deep inside me that I'd kept carefully locked away. So I left my hand in his, and we drove through the city in comfortable silence. Two damaged people finding unexpected comfort in a connection that was supposed to be fake, but was beginning to feel increasingly real. The third week of our arrangement brought an unexpected complication. Someone was trying to poison Sebastian. It happened at a charity gala, one of those glittering affairs where the city's elite gathered to write large checks and feel virtuous. Sebastian had warned me it would be tedious. Hours of small talk, performative philanthropy, business networking disguised as social mingling. I'd worn a midnight blue gown from the designer wardrobe he'd provided, my hair swept up in an elegant twist that had taken me 3 YouTube tutorials to master. "You look stunning," Sebastian said as we arrived, his hand settling at my waist with the possessive familiarity we'd perfected over the past weeks. "Though I'm biased, you'd look stunning in scrubs covered in hospital coffee stains." I laughed, the compliment warming me more than it should. "Smooth talker. Is that how you charm all your fake wives? Just the one who happens to be real in every way that matters?" His voice held that low intimacy that had become increasingly common, the line between performance and genuine feeling growing hazier each day. The gala was exactly as advertised. A sea of designer gowns and expensive suits, champagne flowing freely, a string quartet providing elegant background music. Sebastian navigated the social landscape with practiced ease, introducing me to business associates, city officials, people whose names I recognized from news coverage but never imagined meeting in person. Mayor Hendricks, may I introduce my wife, Sarah? Sebastian's hand stayed at my back, warm and grounding. Sarah, the mayor was just telling me about the new community health initiative the city is launching. Mrs. Russo, a pleasure. The mayor's handshake was firm, his smile professional. Your husband has been generous in supporting our healthcare programs. I understand you're a nurse yourself? Emergency medicine at St. Mary's, I confirmed. And I volunteer at a community clinic in the East District. We're always grateful for any support that expands access to care. What followed was a surprisingly substantive conversation about healthcare policy, funding challenges, the gaps in coverage that left vulnerable populations without adequate care. Sebastian participated but also stepped back, letting me engage directly, his expression holding something that looked like pride. She's passionate, the mayor observed to Sebastian, and knowledgeable. You're a lucky man. I'm aware, Sebastian replied, his gaze on me holding an intensity that made my breath catch. Very aware. After the mayor moved on, I turned to Sebastian with raised eyebrows. Was that weird? Did I overstep by getting into policy discussions at your networking event? That was perfect. Authentic engagement is far more impressive than polite small talk. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. Besides, I like watching you light up when you talk about healthcare access. It reminds me why I agreed to fund the clinic expansion. You mean why you agreed to let me use half my payment to fund it? I corrected. No, I mean why I matched your $50,000 with another $50,000 of my own. He said it casually, as if donating $100,000 to a community clinic was no more significant than buying coffee. The director called to thank me. She cried on the phone, Sarah. Said the funding would transform what they can offer. I stopped walking, pulling him to a halt in the middle of the crowded ballroom. You matched my donation. When were you planning to mention this? I wasn't, necessarily. It's not about credit or recognition. His expression was uncomfortably earnest. You talked about the pediatric program, about children going without vaccinations and asthma treatment. It mattered to you, so it mattered to me. Simple as that. Simple. Nothing about my feelings in that moment was simple. Gratitude, certainly. Admiration for his unexpected generosity. But also something warmer, more dangerous. The growing recognition that Sebastian Russo was nothing like what I'd expected. And that scared me more than his dangerous reputation ever had. Thank you, I managed. That means more than you know. Dance with me. It wasn't a question, and before I could respond, he was leading me onto the dance floor, his hand at my waist, our bodies moving together with an ease that came from weeks of unconscious learning of each other's rhythms and movements. I don't know how to dance like this, I admitted, as he guided me through a waltz. Not properly. You're doing fine. Just follow my lead. His voice was low, intimate, his breath warm against my ear. Besides, everyone's watching us anyway. Might as well give them something to see. He was right. I caught glimpses of other couples watching us, of business associates observing with interest, of society matrons whispering behind champagne flutes. We were performing for an audience, playing our roles. But Sebastian's hand was warm against my back, and the way he looked at me felt increasingly real. What are you thinking? He asked, studying my face. That this is getting complicated, that the lines between fake and real are blurring. I met his gaze directly. that I need to be more careful about maintaining boundaries. Or, he suggested quietly, you could stop overthinking and just be present in this moment. No performance, no pretense. Just us. Before I could respond to that dangerous suggestion, a server appeared with a tray of champagne flutes. Sebastian reached for 2 glasses, handing one to me before taking a sip of his own. I was raising mine to my lips when something made me pause. Call it nursing instinct, battlefield awareness, whatever. The color was wrong, just slightly off from the other glasses I'd seen circulating. Wait. My hand shot out, pulling the glass from Sebastian's lips. Don't drink that. He froze, his eyes narrowing as he registered my alarm. What's wrong? The color. It's cloudier than it should be. I held the glass up to the light, and yes, there was definitely something suspended in the liquid that shouldn't be there. Sebastian, I think someone put something in your drink. His expression went cold, dangerous, the charming socialite mask dropping away to reveal the man beneath, the one capable of violence, of swift and terrible retribution. Are you certain? As certain as I can be without running toxicology. I glanced around, noting the server who'd brought the drinks was nowhere to be seen. Where's the server who handed you this glass? Sebastian's gaze swept the room with predatory focus. Gone. Domenico? He called quietly, and his bodyguard materialized from where he'd been maintaining discreet distance. A rapid exchange in Italian followed, Domenico's expression hardening as Sebastian handed him the suspicious champagne flute. We need to leave, Sebastian said, his hand firm on my elbow. Now. Wait, we should alert security, get them to find that server. Sarah, someone just tried to poison me at a public event filled with witnesses and security cameras. That takes either extraordinary stupidity or serious backing. His voice was low, urgent. Either way, we're not safe here. We leave now, sort it out later. He was right, of course. My emergency training kicked in. Secure the patient, remove from danger, assess for exposure. Did you swallow any of it? No. You stopped me in time. His jaw was tight as we moved toward the exit, Domenico running interference to keep well-wishers from slowing our departure. Your instincts may have just saved my life. In the car, Sebastian made a series of rapid phone calls in Italian, his tone clipped and commanding. I sat beside him, my mind racing through possibilities. What had been in that drink? Arsenic? Cyanide? Something more exotic? How much would have been needed to kill him versus just make him sick? Who had access to add poison to a drink at a heavily secured charity gala? You're analyzing, Sebastian observed, ending his call and turning his attention to me. I can see your brain working through the medical implications. Habit. I'm trying to determine what we're dealing with. I twisted my hands together, adrenaline making me restless. If they were trying to kill you, they'd use something fast-acting, cyanide, maybe strychnine. But if they wanted to make it look like natural causes, something slower. Arsenic, thallium. You know a concerning amount about poisons. Combat medicine includes treating chemical exposure, and I did a rotation in toxicology during my residency. I met his gaze. Sebastian, who wants you dead? His laugh was humorless. That's a longer list than you'd think. Business rivals, people who resent my family's influence, Antonio if he's feeling particularly ambitious. Your cousin? You think Antonio would try to poison you? Probably not personally, but he has the most to gain from my death. He'd inherit my position, my authority, everything Nonna trusts me with. Sebastian ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. Though Antonio tends toward financial manipulation rather than direct violence, this feels more personal. Back at the apartment, Sebastian's associates arrived within the hour, serious men in dark suits who spoke in low tones and carried an air of barely contained violence. I retreated to my room, giving them privacy for whatever discussion was happening, but I couldn't help catching fragments through the door. Traced to the catering service. 3 possible suspects. Send a message back. The last phrase made my stomach turn. Send a message back. In Sebastian's world, that meant retaliation. Probably violent. Someone had tried to poison him, and he would respond in kind. This was the reality I'd been insulated from. The darkness that existed beneath the elegant suits and charitable donations and tender moments with his grandmother. A soft knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Sarah? Can I come in?" I opened the door to find Sebastian alone, his tie loosened, exhaustion evident in the lines around his eyes. "Your associates are gone?" "For now. They're handling the investigation." He hesitated in the doorway, suddenly uncertain in a way I'd never seen from him. "May I sit?" I gestured to the armchair by the window, and he sank into it with a heavy sigh. We sat in silence for a long moment, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows, the weight of the evening settling over us. "Thank you," he said finally, "for noticing the champagne, for stopping me. The lab confirmed your suspicions. Thallium, enough to cause a slow, painful death over several days. Whoever did this wanted me to suffer. I'm glad I could help." I pulled my knees up to my chest, suddenly cold despite the room's warmth. "But Sebastian, this is your real life. The danger, the violence, the people who want to hurt you. I've been living in a bubble these past few weeks, playing at being your wife while remaining carefully separate from the reality of what that actually means. I know. I've deliberately kept you separate, kept you safe." His gaze was intense, troubled. "But tonight proved that association with me is enough to put you in danger. You were standing right next to me. If the poison had been something airborne, something contact-based, you could have been collateral damage." "Are you saying you want to end the arrangement early?" My chest tightened unexpectedly at the thought. "Because I'm a liability now?" "No." He leaned forward, his expression fierce. "I'm saying I need to be honest with you about the risks. That the fiction we've been maintaining isn't going to protect you if my enemies decide to target you to get to me. That I care about you, genuinely, truly care. And the thought of you being hurt because of me is unbearable." The confession hung in the air between us, charged with implications neither of us seemed ready to fully articulate. "Sebastian, you can't care about me. Not really. This was supposed to be a business arrangement." "Was supposed to be." Past tense. He stood, moving closer but stopping just out of reach, as if aware that touching me would cross a line we couldn't uncross. But somewhere between family dinners and late-night conversations and watching you light up when you talk about helping people, it became something else. At least for me. My heart was racing, my careful boundaries crumbling. "We can't do this. We have rules, contracts, clear endpoints." "Fuck the contracts." The raw emotion in his voice sent shivers through me. "Sarah, I know this started as a transaction. But when I thought about that poison, about what would have happened if you hadn't noticed, the first thing I felt was gratitude that you'd be okay, that you'd survive even if I didn't. That's not how you feel about an employee or a business associate. That's how you feel about someone who matters." "This is the adrenaline talking," I said, though I didn't believe it. The near-death experience making everything feel more intense than it is. This is me being honest for possibly the first time in years. He took one step closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his whiskey-colored eyes. "I'm not asking you to love me back. I'm not demanding anything. I just need you to know that what I feel is real, regardless of how it started." "Sebastian, I didn't know how to finish that sentence. Didn't know how to reconcile the dangerous man whose enemies tried to poison him with the gentleman who'd matched my charitable donation without seeking credit. Didn't know how to maintain professional distance from someone who'd somehow slipped past all my defenses. "You don't have to say anything," he continued. "The arrangement stands as written. But if something happens to me, I wanted you to know that these weeks with you they've been everything I didn't know I was missing." Before I could respond, before I could process the confession and my own confused feelings, his phone rang. He answered with obvious frustration, his expression darkening as he listened. "When? How many?" A pause. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." He ended the call, his posture transforming from vulnerable to commanding in an instant. "I have to go. There's been a development with the investigation." "Be careful," I said, the words feeling inadequate. "Please." "Always." He paused at the door, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Lock your door tonight. Domenico will be stationed outside the apartment. You're safe here, I promise." After he left, I sat in the armchair he'd vacated, my mind churning with everything that had happened. Someone had tried to kill Sebastian. He'd confessed feelings that made our arrangement infinitely more complicated, and I couldn't deny the warm flutter in my chest when he'd said I mattered to him. This was supposed to be simple. 1 month, $100,000. Clear boundaries between fake and real. But nothing about Sebastian Russo had ever been simple. I thought about Nonna Rosa's words from that first dinner. "You see the man he could be, the man he wants to be." Maybe she'd been right. Maybe I did see something in Sebastian that others missed. The capacity for gentleness beneath the danger, the loneliness beneath the power, the man who'd lost his parents too young and built walls to protect himself from further loss. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Hey sis, got an A on my project. Professor wants to submit it to a national competition. This wouldn't be possible without you. Love you." Guilt and purpose warred in my chest. I'd taken this arrangement for Marcus, to give him the future he deserved free from debt and worry. But somewhere along the way, it had become about more than money. It had become about Sebastian's unexpected kindness, Nonna Rosa's warmth, even the complicated dynamics of the Russo family that I'd been welcomed into with surprising acceptance. It had become about the way my heart raced when Sebastian smiled at me, the way his hand felt perfectly natural in mine, the way coming home to this apartment had started feeling more real than my actual apartment ever had. I was falling for him. Against all logic, all self-preservation, all the clear-eyed realism that had gotten me through military service and medical training and financial disaster. I was falling for Sebastian Russo, and that terrified me more than any poison ever could. Hours later, I woke to the sound of the apartment door opening. I'd fallen asleep in the armchair, still wearing my gala gown, my phone clutched in my hand. Soft footsteps approached, and then Sebastian was crouching beside me, his expression gentle as he carefully took the phone from my grip. "You should be in bed," he murmured. "I was waiting to make sure you came back safe," I admitted, sleep making me honest. "Did you find who did it?" "We found the server. He was hired by someone I once did business with, someone who felt cheated by terms I negotiated." His jaw tightened. "It's been handled." I didn't ask what handled meant. Didn't want to know the details of whatever violence had been enacted in response to the poisoning attempt. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Better now that I'm home." He stood, offering his hand. "Come on. Let me help you to bed." I let him pull me up, my stiff muscles protesting the hours in the chair. He steadied me when I wobbled on the heels I'd forgotten to remove, his hands warm and solid. We stood there for a moment, too close, the air between us charged with unspoken words and unacknowledged feelings. "Sebastian, what you said earlier." "We don't have to talk about it now," he interrupted gently. "You're exhausted. We both are. Just sleep. Everything else can wait until morning." But as I lay in bed minutes later, his earlier confession played on repeat in my mind. These weeks with you have been everything I didn't know I was missing. The feeling was mutual. Completely, terrifyingly mutual. And I had no idea what to do about it. The morning after the poisoning attempt, I woke to find Sebastian already gone, a note on the kitchen counter written in his surprisingly elegant handwriting. Emergency meeting with family. Back by noon. Stay inside today. Domenico is outside if you need anything. S. I made coffee and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city wake below. 3 weeks into our arrangement, and everything had shifted. The poisoning had been a brutal reminder of Sebastian's reality, but his confession afterward had been even more destabilizing. He had feelings for me. Real feelings. And I could no longer pretend I didn't feel the same. My phone rang. Rebecca, my lawyer, her timing impeccable as always. "Sarah, we need to talk about your arrangement," she said without preamble. "I've been doing some digging into Sebastian Russo's business operations, and what I've found is concerning." My stomach dropped. What kind of concerning? The FBI has been building a case against the Russo family for years. RICO charges, racketeering, extortion, potentially worse. Papers rustled in the background. If they move forward with charges, anyone closely associated with the family could be called to testify or face charges themselves for conspiracy or aiding criminal enterprise. But I'm not actually his wife. The marriage isn't real. You've been living with him, appearing at family events, presumably have knowledge of their operations. Rebecca's voice was gentle but firm. A prosecutor could argue you were complicit, and even if you're not charged, you'd definitely be subpoenaed to testify. Could you do that, Sarah? Could you testify against Sebastian? The question hit me like a physical blow. Could I? 2 weeks ago, maybe, when this was still just a business arrangement, when Sebastian was still just a dangerous stranger, I was helping for money. But now, after seeing his vulnerability, his kindness, the way he looked at his grandmother with such fierce love, I don't know, I admitted. Then you need to think very carefully about whether to continue this arrangement. You've fulfilled most of the month. You could terminate early, take prorated compensation, walk away before things get more complicated. After we hung up, I sat with the weight of her warning. The smart choice was obvious. End the arrangement, take my money, disappear back into my ordinary life before I got more entangled in Sebastian's dangerous world. Protect myself, protect Marcus, protect the future I'd been working so hard to build. But the thought of walking away from Sebastian, from Nonna Rosa, from the strange family I'd accidentally become part of, made my chest ache with unexpected grief. Sebastian returned just after noon, his expression tight with barely controlled fury. He found me in the kitchen, still in my pajamas, nursing my 3rd cup of coffee. "Antonio knows," he said without preamble. "About us. About the arrangement." Ice flooded my veins. "How?" "He hired a private investigator who found our contract, or at least evidence of it. He's threatening to tell Nonna unless I agree to give him control of the family's legitimate business operations." Sebastian's hands were clenched at his sides, his control fraying. "He's using you, using us, as leverage." "So tell your grandmother the truth," I said, though the thought of Nonna Rosa's disappointment made me feel sick. "Better she hears it from you than from Antonio." "It's not that simple." Sebastian moved to the window, staring out at the city with unseeing eyes. "Nonna's health isn't good. Her doctor says stress could trigger a heart attack. If she discovers I lied to her about something this fundamental, something she cares so deeply about." He didn't finish the sentence, but I heard the fear beneath his anger. I set down my coffee and went to him, my hand finding his shoulder. "What do you want to do?" He turned, and the raw emotion in his eyes stole my breath. "I want to make it real. Marry you for real. not as a performance but as a genuine commitment, then Antonio has no leverage, and Nona never has to know the truth about how it started. My heart stopped. Sebastian, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. His hands came up to frame my face, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his gaze. I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know it's asking for more than our agreement stipulated. But Sarah, these past weeks with you, they've been real for me. The late-night conversations, the way you challenge me, how you see past what I am to who I could be. I don't want that to end when the month is up. This is crazy. We barely know each other. I know you're the first person in years who's seen me as just Sebastian, not as Sebastian Russo, the dangerous man everyone fears. I know you donated half your payment to a clinic because helping people matters more to you than money. I know you light up when you talk about your brother, that you take your coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar, that you hum while you cook and don't even realize it. His thumbs stroked across my cheekbones. I know that when I thought about dying from that poison, the thing that bothered me most was never getting to tell you how I feel. Tears blurred my vision. What about the FBI investigation Rebecca mentioned? What about the danger that comes with your life? What about the fact that you live in a world where people try to poison you at charity galas? I'm working on legitimizing everything. The poisoning was someone from my past, but that past is ending. I'm transitioning the family business to completely legal operations. It's why Antonio is so angry, why he's threatening to tell Nona. He knows that once the transition is complete, I'll have moral authority he can't challenge. Sebastian's expression was earnest, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. I can't change what I've been, Sarah, but I can change what I become, especially if I have a reason to. I'm not your reason, I whispered. That's too much responsibility. You're not my reason, you're my choice. There's a difference. He pressed his forehead to mine, his breath warm against my skin. I'm choosing to be better because you make me want to be. But I'd make that choice regardless of whether you say yes. You've already changed me just by seeing that I could change. My mind raced through implications, possibilities, dangers. Marrying Sebastian for real would mean permanent entanglement with his world, with his family, with whatever consequences came from his past. It would mean giving up the careful independence I'd maintained, the ability to walk away when things got hard. But it would also mean having someone who saw me, really saw me, for the first time since before my parents died. Someone who valued my strength, my compassion, my stubborn determination to help people despite how much it cost me. Someone who made me feel safe and challenged and alive in equal measure. I need time, I said finally. This is too big a decision to make in the moment. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. Of course, take whatever time you need. Before he could pull away, I caught his wrist. But Sebastian, what you said about these weeks being real, it's been real for me too. Terrifyingly real. Hope lit in his eyes, transforming his face. Yeah? Yeah. I managed a shaky smile. I don't know what that means yet, or what I'm going to do about Antonio's threats, or how to reconcile my feelings with all the very legitimate concerns about your world. But I need you to know that this stopped being a performance for me weeks ago. He kissed me then, not the careful, performative kisses we'd shared in public, but a real kiss, deep and desperate and achingly tender. His hands cradled my face like I was precious, breakable, worth protecting. My hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and for several long moments, nothing existed except the warmth of his mouth, the solid strength of his body, the rightness of being in his arms. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine again. Take your time deciding, but know that whatever you choose, I'm already yours. Have been for weeks, probably. The afternoon passed in strange limbo. Sebastian disappeared into his office for business calls, and I tried to work through my confusion by doing what I always did when stressed. I researched. The FBI investigation Rebecca mentioned, the Russo family's business operations, the legitimate companies Sebastian claimed to be transitioning toward. What I found was complicated. Yes, there were allegations, investigations, whispered connections to criminal enterprises. But there was also substantial evidence of Sebastian's recent efforts to divest from questionable operations, to move family assets into legitimate real estate, hospitality, and import businesses. The transition wasn't complete, but it was real, documented, visible in business filings and corporate restructuring. He was trying to change, not because I'd asked him to, but because he'd chosen it. That evening, Nonna Rosa called. "Sarah, Cara, I need you to come for dinner tonight. Just you, not Sebastiano. We need to talk, woman to woman." My stomach dropped. Did she know? Had Antonio already told her? "Of course, Nonna. What time?" 6 o'clock. I'll make your favorite, the ossobuco you loved last time. After I hung up, I found Sebastian in his office. "Your grandmother wants to see me. Alone." His expression darkened. Antonio got to her first. Damn it, I should have known he wouldn't wait. Maybe she just wants to talk. Maybe Antonio hasn't said anything yet. My grandmother doesn't do impromptu solo dinners without reason. He stood, moving to me with worried eyes. "Sarah, whatever she says, whatever Antonio may have told her, remember that you don't owe anyone explanations. If you want to walk away from all of this, I'll make sure you get full compensation, and I'll handle the fallout." "I'm not walking away." The words came out more certain than I felt. Not until I understand what's happening. Nonna Rosa's home felt different approaching it alone, more intimidating, less like the warm family gathering place I'd come to appreciate. The door opened before I could knock, and Nonna stood there, her expression unreadable. "Come in, Cara. We have much to discuss." The dining room table was set for two, the ossobuco already plated, wine poured. We ate in uncomfortable silence for several minutes before Nonna finally spoke. "Antonio came to see me today. He told me interesting things about you and my Sebastiano." Her gaze was sharp, assessing. "He said your marriage is a business arrangement, that my grandson paid you to pretend to be his wife to satisfy my traditional expectations." My throat went dry. "Nonna, let me finish." She held up a hand. "Antonio showed me what he claimed was evidence. Financial transactions, contract negotiations, proof that you were hired for this deception." Shame burned through me. "I'm sorry. We never meant to hurt you. And yet I am hurt." Her voice was quiet, sad, not because the marriage started as a business arrangement, but because you both thought I would not understand, would not accept the truth. I looked up, startled. "You're not angry about the deception?" "Oh, I'm angry about the deception, yes. Angry that my grandson felt he needed to lie to me, that you both underestimated my ability to see what was real." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "But Sarah, I have eyes. I have lived 83 years and learned to recognize true feeling versus performance. What is between you and Sebastiano? That is real, regardless of how it began." "It started as fake," I admitted, tears welling. "But it became something else, at least for me. And for him. I see it in how he looks at you when you're not watching, how he speaks your name with such tenderness, how he has changed since you entered his life." She reached across the table, taking my hand. "My grandson has lived with walls around his heart since his parents died. He learned to trust no one completely, to show only what he wanted people to see. But with you, Those walls are gone. You see him, truly see him, and he sees you. That is not something money can buy. But we still lied to you, I whispered. Yes, and we will address that dishonesty. But I am more concerned with what comes next than what came before. She squeezed my hand. Sarah, do you love my grandson? The direct question forced me to confront what I'd been avoiding. Did I love Sebastian? The dangerous man whose enemies tried to poison him, whose past was morally complicated at best, whose world was violence and power disguised in expensive suits? But also the man who'd matched my charitable donation without seeking credit, who'd confessed his feelings with raw honesty, who'd held me after the poisoning attempt like I was precious, who'd looked at his grandmother with such fierce love that it made my heart ache. Yes, I admitted. I love him. God help me, I do. Nonna Rosa smiled, truly smiled, her whole face lighting with joy. Then we have no problem. Only a solution. You make the marriage real. Not for me, not for family expectations, but because you choose each other. It's more complicated than that. There's Antonio's threats, the FBI investigation, the danger that comes with Sebastian's life. Life is always complicated, Kara. Always dangerous in different ways. The question is not whether there will be challenges, but whether you face them together or apart. She rose, moving to pull me into a warm embrace. My Sebastiano needs you. Not because you make him look responsible, but because you make him want to be better. That is love's greatest gift, not changing someone, but inspiring them to change themselves. I clung to her, this wise woman who'd somehow seen through our deception to the truth beneath. What do I do about Antonio? About his threats? Let me handle my nephew. He forgets that I built this family, that I see through manipulation as easily as glass. Her voice hardened. Antonio will learn that threatening family, and you are family now, marriage certificate or not, is not acceptable. When I returned to the apartment hours later, I found Sebastian pacing the living room, his phone clutched in his hand. He looked up as I entered, anxiety clear in his eyes. Nonna called. She told me you talked, that Antonio had shown her the contract evidence. He moved toward me cautiously, as if afraid I might bolt. Sarah, I'm sorry. I should have told her the truth from the beginning, should never have put you in this position. She knows it's real, I interrupted. Between us. She saw it before we did, apparently. He stopped, processing. She's not angry? She's angry about the deception, but more concerned with what we do next. I moved closer, my heart racing with the decision I'd made during the drive back. Sebastian, your grandmother asked if I love you. I told her yes. The hope that blazed in his eyes was almost painful to see. Sarah, let me finish. I love you, which is terrifying and complicated and probably incredibly stupid given everything. But it's true. I took a deep breath. But I need things from you if we're going to make this real. Complete honesty from now on. No more protective deceptions. A clear timeline for how you're transitioning out of anything illegal. And a real commitment to building something legitimate. Something I can be part of without compromising my ethics. Done. All of it. Whatever you need. He closed the distance between us, his hands gentle as they framed my face. Sarah, I will spend the rest of my life earning your trust, proving I'm worth the risk you're taking. I swear it. And I need you to understand that I'm not giving up nursing, not giving up the clinic work. That's who I am. I help people. That doesn't change just because I'm Mrs. Russo for real now. I wouldn't want you to change. Your compassion, your determination to help people. That's what I love about you. His thumb stroked across my cheekbones. Besides, the clinic needs someone on the board of directors now that we've expanded funding. I was hoping you'd accept that position. Despite everything, I laughed, You're incorrigible. I'm in love with you, he corrected. There's a difference. This time when he kissed me, it felt like a promise, like the beginning of something real and lasting, built on a foundation of complicated truth rather than comfortable fiction. His hands were gentle but certain, and I melted into him, into this choice I was making with open eyes. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. So, is that a yes? You'll marry me for real? Make this arrangement permanent? On one condition, I said, surprising myself. We tell your family the whole truth at Sunday dinner. No more deceptions, no more secrets. If we're building something real, it starts with honesty. He hesitated only briefly before nodding. Agreed. Complete honesty. That Sunday, we sat in Nonna Rosa's dining room surrounded by family, and Sebastian told them everything. How he'd hired me initially, how the arrangement had evolved into genuine feelings, how he was committed to making it real. Antonio's face went through several shades of red. Maria looked touched, Francesca seemed amused, and Nonna Rosa watched it all with satisfaction. So you see, Sebastian finished, his hand tight in mine. I'm asking Sarah to truly marry me now. Not for appearances, not to satisfy family expectations, but because I love her. Because she makes me want to be better than I've been. Antonio started to speak, probably to object or undermine, but Nonna Rosa cut him off with a single sharp word in Italian. What followed was a rapid exchange, her voice carrying authority that made even Antonio fall silent. Finally, she turned back to us, switching to English. The family accepts this truth. We celebrate honesty over comfortable deception. And Antonio, her gaze hardened, you will apologize for attempting to use private information as leverage against your cousin. We are family. We protect each other, not exploit each other. Antonio's apology was grudging, but sincere enough. And as the dinner progressed, the atmosphere shifted from tense to genuinely celebratory. Maria hugged me, welcoming me officially to the family. Francesca offered to help plan a real wedding. Even Antonio's children warmed up, excited about their cousin's upcoming marriage. After dinner, as Sebastian and I drove back to the apartment, our apartment, I was beginning to think of it, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of deception was gone, replaced by the clean clarity of truth. No regrets? Sebastian asked, glancing at me as we navigated city traffic. Surprisingly, no. I reached over, taking his hand. This is crazy and complicated, and definitely not what I expected when I agreed to treat your gunshot wound. But it's real. That matters. It matters more than anything. He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. 3 months later, I stood in Nonna Rosa's garden wearing a simple white dress. Sebastian in a dark suit beside me, our families gathered around us. This time, the vows were real, the commitment genuine, the love undeniable. I, Sarah Mitchell, take you, Sebastian Russo, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. To be my husband. To stand with you through danger and peace, through complicated truths and simple joys. I choose you, every day. I, Sebastian Russo, take you, Sarah Mitchell. His voice was rough with emotion. To be my wife. To protect you. To honor you. To build something legitimate and lasting with you. You've shown me that who I've been doesn't have to define who I become. I choose you, always. As he kissed me, my husband, truly, I heard Nonna Rosa sigh with satisfaction, saw Marcus beaming from the front row, felt the warmth of family surrounding us. This strange path that had started with a wounded man and a desperate nurse had led us here, to something neither of us could have predicted, but both of us chose. Later, at the reception, Sebastian pulled me aside, away from the music and laughter. "I have something for you," he said, pulling out an envelope. "Your original payment, plus the completion bonus. You fulfilled every term of our agreement." I stared at the envelope, then pushed it back toward him. "I don't want it. Donate it to the clinic." "Sarah." "Our arrangement is over, Sebastian. What we have now isn't a business deal. It's real." I met his gaze steadily. "The money served its purpose. It got us here. But I don't need payment for loving you." He pulled me close, his arms secure around me. "Have I mentioned that you're extraordinary?" "Once or twice. You can keep mentioning it, though." I smiled up at him. "I do have one request, though. Help me open my own clinic. Not funded by your family money, but as a legitimate business venture we build together. Your business expertise, my medical knowledge." "Done. We start planning tomorrow." He kissed my forehead. "See? We're already building something legitimate together." From one of the windows, I saw Nonna Rosa watching us, her expression content. She caught my eye and nodded, a gesture of approval and love that needed no words. I'd come into Sebastian's life to play a role, to perform a fiction for money. But somewhere between the pretense and the truth, between the careful boundaries and the messy reality, we'd built something genuine, something worth fighting for. Something real. And that, I thought as Sebastian spun me into a dance, his laughter warm against my ear, was worth more than any contract could have specified. We'd both abdicated our carefully controlled lives. Him from the criminal empire he was systematically dismantling, me from the lonely independence I'd clung to for so long, to build something neither of us had known we needed. A partnership. A family. A future. Together.